Become a member of the 660 Club and listen to archives of your favorite shows online.
It will be found an unjust and unwise jealousy to deprive a man of his natural liberty upon the supposition he may abuse it. George Washington.
They who would give up an essential liberty for temporary security deserve neither liberty or security. Benjamin Franklin.
The Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It is an instrument for the people to restrain the government, lest it come to dominate our lives and interests. Patrick Henry.
America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it would be because we destroyed ourselves. Abraham Lincoln.
I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. Thomas Jefferson.
Property is surely a right of mankind as real as liberty. John Adams.
The Constitution is the guide which I never will abandon. George Washington.
Saturday morning wake-up call. This is a local talk radio, 660 on your AM dial, KFAR in Fairbanks, Alaska, but we are online at KFAR660.com and on your smartphone with the free TuneIn Radio app. I am the man with the face made for radio, the monkey behind the machine, Steve Floyd. Joining us in the studio, the real brains of the operation, the Bennett brothers. We've got Aaron Bennett and Josh Bennett in here today. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right.
Now we got to start that.
No, you just have to make sure you talk into the microphone instead of across the microphone.
Good morning, Steve.
There you go. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. That's much better.
That was good.
All right. What is on the docket this morning, gentlemen?
You rolling?
No. The thing I said we'd talk about, not really ready to talk about yet. Tried putting something together, but I want to present it good so I don't have to keep doing it over and over and over again. So
knowledgeably?
Right. I mean, just because I understand it doesn't mean I can convey it yet.
So you just want to just start bashing someone, or?
Yeah. Got to find some kind of piece of crap of the week, right?
Or we could just talk about the weather.
I can't believe the sun shines on the Burrow building.
Let's do
well as everything else.
The sun shines on the good and the evil alike, sir.
We could do a Fairbanks fishing report. The rivers are too muddy, so don't try it.
Wait. I thought all of those construction zones had these new DEC inspired programs to keep the river from getting muddy. We have to keep the runoff from reaching the river, right?
Yeah, someone forgot to tell God about the SWIP program.
Oh, you know what? I laughed uncontrollably when the river rose last week and took out all of those little dikes that they had put up to keep those little wattles that were designed to keep the rainwater out of the river, and the river just came up and swallowed them all and tore them down.
It is funny because I had to do a class to be it's called a Cecil lead. I don't remember what it stands for, but anyways, so you can do stormwater pollution prevention, and so I sat through this class. It's like 2 days while these people talk about nonsense. And it costs money, too, which isn't very nice because you're forced to do it. But that's what we love about government monopolies. So, they're talking about when you're working out here in Fairbanks, the whole point of it is that you've got to put up these barriers to keep, when it rains and you're doing a job site, you don't want the the drain off, the runoff from the rain, to take silt from your job and go into the Chena River, because that'll pollute it. And then that silt will go eventually to the Tanana.
No, has anybody actually seen the Chena or the Tanana lately?
I actually asked the guy that was doing the class. I said, hello? Do you know what the Tanana is filled with? Silt. Like, it'll clog your jet outboard.
Glacier.
Oh, it's
silt.
right.
It didn't come from a construction
It can't
site.
be a foreign silt.
It doesn't get worse than glacier silt.
Yeah, it'll actually fill your clothes. That's just an aside. It's just funny.
It'll take you to the bottom.
Yeah.
Tanana, if you go swimming in the Tanana, you could drown because
The
your
silt will
clothes will
fill
get,
it. Yeah. It's just funny.
You're not supposed to swim in your clothes, Steve.
You're not supposed to fall off your boat either.
Or jump out of your canoe.
I'm just saying that my Josh can attest to this.
Actually, I can remember a time with Josh when we were in a canoe in the Tanana. I don't even...
No, that was a Chattanooga.
Oh, well, same scenario.
And you flipped us over.
I flipped us over. Right.
I have managed to flip over a cargo canoe. You got to think about...
Steve, you have an orange streak in your hair. I believe anything.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask you guys a question? Seriously, this is something my wife asked me a couple weeks ago after we did that whole show on nullification. And she said, when we start tossing these terms around, she thinks she knows what we're talking about, but then sometimes it's kind of unclear exactly. And she said it would be helpful, and I agree with her, if we were to take some time every once in a while just to explain what we mean by the certain terms that we use, like nullification, jury nullification. And when I sat down and I explained, well, that the whole issue is that a law is nullified or is basically made to...
I could explain it in layman's terms.
Go right ahead, please.
Layman's terms would be, let's say, just set up a scenario. A scenario would be they made a law that there's no wading in the Tanana. And a guy goes out and wades in the Tanana. So he gets hauled in to court and sits in front of a jury, and the jury decides, yeah, obviously the guy was wading in the Tanana, so he's guilty as far as he did break this law. The jury's duty, the only purpose in having a jury, is to judge the law itself and say, and basically it's a self-reflection. Do I want to be put in jail if I ever wade in the Tanana? So you have the right and the duty, actually, as a juror, to say, you know what, he was wading in the Tanana, but it's a ridiculous law, and he's not guilty. And so the next person that wades in the Tanana, and they get hauled in, they don't even have to go to court. They just cite that case law and say, well, the jury already decided. That's the kind of precedent you lay down as a juror, is you actually decide law. So your ruling can be cited by generations to come. It's called case law, correct?
Yeah. Well, the state can still haul you in there, but you should be able to say, well...
That's what Frank Turney was pointing out when we had him on, is that with the Salem witch trials, what brought them to the end is that there were 52... Not convictions, but the opposite. What is it when they throw it out of court?
Nullification.
Well, no, I know that was nullification, but when they acquittals. Thank you.
Acquittals. Okay.
Not entirely. 52 acquittals in a row. 52 acquittals in a row is what brought the Salem witch trials to a close.
Right. It's to invalidate something.
And that's what nullification means: is that you have invalidated that law. That law is no longer going to be enforced because it's a stupid law. You basically have done the same as striking it from the books, but from a layman's point of view. From the
right.
juror.
A good example would be like the Firearms Freedom Act, which was an attempt to free up regulation on firearms in Alaska, which, personal opinion, didn't do a very good job, but that's beside the point. It would be much more effective if one person here in Alaska got hauled in for an illegal firearm and the jury decided that he was not guilty based on the fact that the law sucks. And immediately, we could all start to own whatever gun we wanted, because we'd just be able to cite that case law because the jury decided. When you go,
no, they would still be able. They would still haul you into court. It takes.
I understand you still go to court, But you'd be able to cite that case law that's already been decided.
I don't know.
Lawyers do it.
You
all
could
the
use
time.
it right. They're usually citing a judge. No, they would definitely be able to say, "Look, this jury said blah blah blah. This was
And then
not
That
right."
was absolutely the original intent.
The beauty of it, though, is that whatever other new information that they tried to introduce, say, if Aaron got taken in, the jury threw it out and they said, well, okay, we're going to try it on Josh. Josh quotes Aaron's case law. The prosecutor introduces new evidence to try to prove that what you did, even though it was the same as what he did, it was so much more heinous. It rounds it out and makes it more complete, so that when the jury says, no, what he did also is not a crime. You may have made it illegal,
but it's not a crime.
but it is not a crime. And because it is not a crime, we are not going to convict him, even though you may be telling me, Mr. Judge, who was it? There's a magistrate here in town who has consistently instructed his juries that they must find a person guilty even if they disagree with the law. Who was that?
I think it was Joe Miller.
You're right. It was Joe Miller. He's running for some inconsequential office right now, but he has, as a magistrate, consistently told jurors something that is wrong.
And he stands behind it, too.
Well, this is where the people have to stand up, because they need to be jurors. The way they stop those laws is when they're consistently nullifying them to the point where it costs the state too much money
Bingo.
to bring someone into court because the law is going to get nullified. That's why the Salem witch trials. After 52 acquittals, they finally said, this is getting ridiculous. We can't burn anybody.
That's why we always correlate it with no victim, no crime.
Exactly.
If there isn't a victim, how can there be a crime?
That's law. That's real law.
With a capital L?
Capital L, law. No victim, no crime. And that's where we got, when Frank was here, we talked a lot about the...
But the state has victims all the time.
Exactly.
That's a
Nazi Germany came to my mind, and then I thought, it actually didn't have to be Nazis.
We are all victims of the state.
I want to have Frank on again sometime to go over...
On purpose?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just kidding.
To have him go over grand juries, because it's something that we didn't get to talk about very much, and that's so important. Grand juries were originally not set up... Their purpose isn't to find that the state should prosecute another person, necessarily. I mean, that's one function that they have. The other function that they have is to prosecute government officials.
To look into misconduct by
Right.
those who are entrusted with the machinations
Exactly.
of the state.
That is their most important... That's their most important job. That's why they exist.
Presentment.
Yes. They can actually... You can call a grand jury to investigate. They're supposed to be able to investigate a criminal or misconduct, whatever, to an official of the government, of the state, and bring charges against him for whatever. And they have the power to call witnesses, which they always try to, like a prosecutor will try to make you think that you're just supposed to sit there and rubber stamp. They should be able to investigate what they're being told. They should be able to call in witnesses. They can go after people that are in the government. That's their main objective, and that would be so sweet. I know in Florida, I believe it was last year, they actually convened a grand jury, and that grand jury decided to go after some state officials that were corrupt. It was great. I mean, what was funny was that the government was freaking out. They're like, hey, you guys, that's not why, that's not your job.
That's not why we asked you there. You can't do that.
But they did. I never followed up to, I don't remember if they ever found anybody guilty or not, but, sent it on to a jury or not, I don't know.
Part of the beauty of it is it seems like whenever a public official begins to get investigated, if there's even a slim chance that they may be found guilty, they resign.
Oh, yeah.
They leave. They get out.
They roll.
And you know what? That would be awesome if we had just a whole bunch
Get more people.
Get out! Run away! Hey, I don't know if you heard about what happened just last week. A woman from Toke, driving on the Parks Highway, She was not actually witnessed driving on the Parks Highway. She was pulled over. Actually, her son was driving, her 13-year-old son. She had put him in the driver's seat because she was too drunk to drive. So she was charged with child endangerment for putting her son in the driver's seat. She was also charged with allowing an unauthorized person to drive. And here's the beauty of it. She was charged with drunk driving.
Well, that figures.
No witness, no evidence, just the fact that she had to have been driving at some point. She was charged with drunk driving. Isn't this what we're talking about? The kind of issue that ought to be nullified?
Yeah.
Who's the victim there?
That reminds me of. I can't remember the guy's name now. Darn it. He was around during Locke's time. He was, gosh, Algernon Sidney. So he.
Can't believe you forgot that name.
I know. Should be on the tip of my tongue at any moment.
I can't believe you know that name.
He was around turn of the 17th century. So it was like 1680s or somewhere in there. And he was vehemently against the king. It was when they kicked the king out. They had the Glorious Revolution or whatever, and when the king came back, he was vehemently, he was like, no king. And in common law, you had to have two witnesses to prosecute anything, but you had to have two witnesses for to execute someone. And this was one time where one person heard him say something, and then the rest of the evidence they used was something that he wrote. So they used his testimony, quote unquote, against him, which is something that historically why the founding fathers, one of the things in the Bill of Rights, you can't testify against yourself.
Which amendment is that?
That's the fifth.
I think it's like the only one the government recognizes, because it's the only one that the government officials
you plead the fifth.
Oh, I'm going to plead the fifth.
Yeah, it's the one the government uses all the time when they get investigated. I plead the fifth.
I'm going to plead the second and make you talk.
So Algernon Sidney, this is one of the things where this shattered the common law world, the European world, that they convicted him on his own testimony. And, one person said, yeah, I know that he committed treason against the king. And so they threw him in jail over that. And then when they brought him to court, and of course it was the king that was presiding, one of his goons.
You mean all our laws came from somewhere?
Yeah, it's really weird. I know they're old dead people, and we shouldn't really care what old dead people think or thought. We should just start from today, fresh today.
Just let our glorious leader tell us what we're...
Yeah, that'd be so much simpler for him.
Can I make laws?
You can make laws.
You can make laws if you get voted in.
I'll vote for you.
Against who?
Everyone you want.
Yes.
Everyone that we
as
don't
long
like.
as it's to you and your protege's advantage.
Yeah,
Well, why would I put it against my own advantage?
You wouldn't.
So back to Algernon. This is really important. I know it's old, but that's where one of the things where we got the Fifth Amendment was you can't plead.
Your words can't be used against
Right. Gosh.
You can't incriminate yourself.
You can't incriminate yourself. They can't use that against you. So they did do that, even though in common law in England you had to have two witnesses for a capital crime, which treason is a capital crime. The state hates it. So one guy said he committed treason, and they hauled him into court, and he said, where are my witnesses? Where are your witnesses? Where is my accuser? I get to face my accuser. So they brought out his pamphlet and said, here is the rest of the evidence.
So he has to face himself.
So he had to face himself. So they executed him over it. So the reason I'm bringing that up is that, one, the Fifth Amendment came from that, but the other was he didn't get a trial by jury. That was another thing. But this shocked the Western world, if you call it the Western world then, the European world. And it actually, John Locke, he took notice of it. The Cato brothers, they weren't brothers, but the Cato letters, they talked about that some too. So the reason I'm bringing this up is Aaron was talking about, someone was saying that who cares about old dead people and what they thought and blah, 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 and all this and that. Everything that goes on, we should be able to look past, in the past, like when we were talking about jury nullification. Where do we get the freedom of press? Jury nullification. The right to bear arms. That came about partially because of jury nullification. Over and over and over. The right to assemble, jury nullification. The right to have unions, jury nullification.
Now, if we go back and we have to depend on what old dead people did before us instead of doing it ourselves, that means that we're going to have to accept someone else's technology, like this thing called the wheel. And you're telling me that we don't have that instead of going out and making our own new wheel every time we want to go somewhere, that we should just trust that this technology that has come before us has been proven, even though it was invented by old dead guys. Is that what you're telling me?
I think that we need to advance ourselves in the way that we need to be progressives in the liberty sense, but we use these old writings and these old people to look back to get a guideline.
I don't have to reinvent the wheel?
No. Guidelines are good. Hey, jump in here.
Oh, I was reading. Sorry. Well, I don't know where you're at.
We get a lot of reading done. When
talking about reinventing the wheel and how when someone says that we shouldn't have to depend on the words of old dead guys, that what they're really saying is how idiotic and stupid they are. Because what you're going to do, you're not just going to throw out the things you disagree with. You're going to throw out everything that's gotten us where we are right now.
Right. I was arguing with somebody on Facebook, like always, about it, and I was talking about, if we were talking about physics, and I brought up Isaac Newton's discovered law of gravity and Socrates. How do you say his
Socrates.
name? Is it Socrates?
It is Socrates. Socrates is from Bill and Ted.
Socrates discovered law of displacement. Right? Both of those are involved in physics. And if you were just to throw both of those guys out because they're from a long time ago and they're dead,
you wouldn't be able to build a boat.
You wouldn't be able to do physics, right?
Yeah. Not at all.
Displacement comes from gravity. And physics involve both of those, gravity and displacement.
They're all dead guys.
Right.
So we shouldn't listen.
So Einstein couldn't have known anything about physics without looking to those two guys first. You can't just go back to the Constitution, in other words, and say, oh, they came up with this out of their heinies. They got it from somewhere.
It's almost as if they discovered it.
Well, I mean, and I think kind of what we're hitting on here is you have people that scream and yell they want to go back to the Constitution. What is the Constitution? It's just a set of laws that were discovered. They weren't created. They were already known. They were already common. They're not laws that they made up out of somewhere. They didn't create any of those. Those were gathered from things like Josh was just explaining. So,
they didn't just get a magic marker and say, let's just say you can't be forced to testify against yourself. That sounds like something we should...
No, and so people want to go back to the Constitution, but they don't even grasp law in general anyway. They sit here and they banter back and forth about Obama or Mitt Romney or whatever it might be, and scream and yell and holler and use political law and creative law to rape and plunder and destroy each other. And they don't even grasp the basics of real law. And they want to go back to the Constitution. It's not possible. When you don't even recognize where those things came from, how they came to be, the men that suffered to make those things happen, the thought that went into those things. I mean, come on. They're discovered laws. They're immutable laws.
And you have to also understand that the American Constitution was never intended to
be an end all.
Yeah, it was never intended to be for the rest of civilizations, and it also was never intended to rule over such a large area.
No.
It wasn't. They never imagined that America could be this big, and they would never.
And they never imagined that we would get to the point where we view created law, legislated law, as an end-all law, where a body of men, how many, 500 and something people
now?
Big?
Yeah.
500 and something people big, decide the fate of millions and millions of people.
300
million people. They left 300 million people the power to nullify and eradicate those 500 men's will. And we don't assert any of that. You can't go back to the Constitution when you have mountains and mountains of legislative paper laws. How do you think you can go back to the Constitution? How are you going to have a limited government? How can you have any of the things that anybody talks about?
In a sense, if you were going to go back to the Constitution, we would have to go back to a much smaller territory. I mean, you think about how the westward expansion and just adding these vast swaths of land, going out and taking by force away from the people that were living there.
Yeah, we'd have to go back to Louisiana Purchase and all that and decide that was unconstitutional.
Which it was.
Yes. Thomas Jefferson didn't have the right to do that. It's interesting that James Madison actually, he asked him, he said, what do I do here? Is this, and Madison, because he was so involved in the Constitution, and he was considered to be the wisest man at the time, because he was brilliant. I mean, even when he was in his early 20s, I think he graduated from Princeton, one of those ones that have been around forever. He was one of very few, and he was the top of his class. He said, what do I do here? And Madison was like, I think it's okay. I think it's constitutional. Go ahead and do it. And then after, Jefferson said, wow, this is wrong. I did not have the power.
Well, in a sense, isn't everybody who comes into the Union supposed to do so voluntarily?
Yeah.
We're up against the clock. Fox News on the way right here on KFAR, local talk radio.
KFAR. Fox News is now.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. The Oklahoma City area hit with more tornadoes and heavy rain that lasted through the night, leaving 9 dead and 75 injured. Now floodwaters the issue.
A lot of standing water across the road. Rivers that are up and over their banks because there was a terrific amount of water that came out of these thunderstorms. One thunderstorm piled up on top of the other, all of them dumping water.
Fox's Mike Tobin. Houston investigators looking into the cause of a motel restaurant blaze that killed 4 firefighters.
We do know that there was a collapse, and we know that's what caused our firefighters to get trapped.
Terry Garrison is the Houston fire chief.
We're going to look at organizationally. We're going to look at from the top to the bottom.
An employee says it appears the fire started around the motel's restaurant.
Fox Radio's Jessica Rosenthal. The UN says more than 1,000 people were killed in attacks across Iraq in May, the most in any single month in years. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Your opinions, your passion. Hear about it and talk about it on Local News Radio 660 KFAR.
Don't wanna be an American idiot. Don't want a nation under the new media. And can you hear the sound of hysteria? The subliminal mind, America. Welcome to a new kind of tension all across the alien nation. Everything isn't meant to be okay. Television dreams of tomorrow, where not the ones are meant to follow. Though that's enough to want you.
And welcome back to Patriots Lament, Hour 1. Here we call it the Saturday morning wake-up call. I am Steve Floyd, the monkey behind the machine. Joining us in the studio, of course, as always, the Bennett brothers. Good morning, Josh. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Steve.
All right. Do either one of you want to be an American idiot?
No. nor should anyone listening. We're having another great conversation in between commercial breaks.
So I just ought to leave the mic on and let people kind of sort out between the Fox News and your conversation. They might learn more by listening to the conversation than by listening to the news.
Well, it's funny because when we have the commercials, we actually ask each other questions and think about stuff. And then when we get on the air, we just kind of
forget everything.
It's weird. One of the things we were talking about was the importance of law. One of the reasons that we don't agree with armed revolution is the law. What would you have out of an armed revolution? You can't have... I would fear an armed revolution for more reasons than just physical dangers. I would fear it for what would come afterwards. And that would be because people do not understand law. It would be because people call in the show and say, we need a better leader. We need to be ruled in a better way. We need to have whoever.
If we only had the right person in charge.
Right.
And the anger we receive over talking about not forcing your will on your neighbor through voting and through mandates and things of that nature, people aren't going to give that up. If we had an armed revolution and the power was up for grabs, it would be exponentially worse.
Well, I mean, there have been certain people in this very community who are advocating openly getting rid of the people that we have now by whatever means necessary, including violence, and then saying, well, what would we replace it with?
Me.
Yes. We need to replace it with me.
No, me.
No, that's what happens.
Exactly.
No, me.
No, me. And what I said when I was presented with that with no, none of the above, goodbye.
Now, I personally don't believe that it would be that people would openly extort each other, but they would definitely open a new form, a new system of
extortion
and theft and force. Absolutely.
Right, because
immediate.
It comes down to people don't want to have their own self-discipline or self-control, self-governance. They would immediately go to, someone needs to govern me because I want that.
Tell me what to do.
And steal for me. I mean, basically, isn't it? It's also about stealing for me. You vote someone in to do something that would be wrong for you to do, but you want it to happen anyway.
Unless you vote for Joe Miller.
Well, yeah, of course. That's okay.
Okay, sarcasm alert.
As long as it's not marked baggage.
Right, the old dichotomy, right, left, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. They're the same body politic.
Wasn't Lisa Murkowski in the middle?
Hey, I wanted to remind you guys you're going off on a political tangent right here. We're talking an awful lot about specific political candidates. I just wanted to throw that out there, let you know that we're doing that.
Is that legal?
I just wanted to throw the red flag because it's one of those things that you said you wanted to avoid in this program.
Oh, that's true.
All right, flag.
I thought we said we just didn't want to promote any...
No, we didn't want to just talk about right and left.
Or about specific candidates, because what that does is that takes the discussion away from making people think about it and gets them back in that partisan mindset of anybody but candidate A or rah-rah for candidate B. Instead, start thinking about why do people want to promote partisanship? Why do people want you talking about politics?
Why do people want to vote for anyone anyways? To rule over them.
Or to rule over their neighbor.
Well, I just don't understand the whole thing of ruling over yourself. You have so little self-respect. That's what it comes down to. You have so little self-respect that you want someone to rule over you. I guess the biggest thing is that we assume that someone has to rule over us, so we have to have the right person that we want to rule over us. Because our mindset is someone has to be there, so it needs to be my guy. We say no. We do not have to have someone be there.
Well, part of it here in Alaska has to do with the issue of boroughs and the local government aspect, because right now what's going on down in Nenana is that there are certain people that are trying to get a borough formed, even though right now they currently do not have a structured borough.
Right, but the people that are trying to do that are just trying to create another monopoly.
Look at Section 3 right there. Which article is that?
Boroughs.
Right, but what's the article above section?
Article 10, Section 3.
Article 10, Section 3 of the Alaska State Constitution basically lays out that the entire state shall be divided into boroughs. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They're either organized boroughs or they're unorganized boroughs. The state constitution from day one set up a framework of oppression of every single person in the state. And those who go outside the organized boroughs, like our friend Timothy, or Hillbilly, or whatever he wants to go by, to get away from government is merely delaying the fact that he is already in a structure here in the state of Alaska which permits for his oppression. And if you look at it, what's going on right now, they're trying to organize the folks in Nenana. I say resist. Resist the organization.
Right, but the people that want it either want to force something on somebody and they can't do it any other way, or they're hoping to gain from it.
It comes down to money.
I think both.
Often, yeah.
Probably both.
Cash.
I mean,
well, you got the pipeline.
I hope they're smart enough to see that monopolies are bad. I mean, all they have to do is look at GVEA and realize that monopolies are a joke.
I got to go to a dinner for my son's birthday. And there was this big bunch of folks sitting behind us. They were having a wonderful dinner, a wonderful time. And my daughter was watching, I guess, I don't know. She wasn't really paying attention to them until she goes, wow, Dad, those guys really, look at that. They're bringing out the champagne. They're bringing out champagnes, expensive beers, nice big dinner and everything. And they had the CEO start talking. You know, you got the little ding, 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 attention, attention. So the CEO starts talking about how great their organization was. And I just kind of listened. It was neat. I got to go through this real quick. And I'm listening to him and I think, wow, this must be some kind of a for-profit corporation back here. They're talking about what a wonderful job they're doing. The next guy gets up and he starts talking about what a great job they're doing, keeping the customers' prices at the lowest means possible, and customer satisfaction is all good and everything. And I'm thinking, man, who are these people? These people must rock and roll. I was feeling proud because I'm thinking capitalism, right? And the next guy gets up and he says, we're not the most important part of this structure. And I'm thinking, yeah, it's your customers. And he said, it's our employees. And he named off 3 different things. And the customer never came up, which I thought was funny. That was actually a little red flag. I thought, wait, customers should be in one of those 3 there. And so the whole time I'm thinking, here is a great organization that's obviously making some cash money. And the board's here living it up, which is fine. I'm all for that.
Especially if they're using profits that have been made.
Exactly.
Through customer choice.
And then as they were going, this is after, keeping prices down for our customers, all this. And the guy said, we here at GVEA, and I lost it. Like, just red across my eyebrows. I wanted so bad. I mean, I did blurt out a little bit something about low prices for customers. I pushed my chair back. My wife said, please don't. So I let them have their dinner. But anyways, I wish I would have filmed them. So these guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't the heads of those places make hundreds of thousands of dollars?
Yes.
The CEO, somewhere in the 600, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Thousand.
I believe it is over $500,000
a year. And there's 3 or 4 of them that make over $500,000 a year. I might be wrong, so I'm not saying that that's biblical, but I'm saying it's pretty dang close to the truth.
I know that there are several that make 6 figures.
How is that possible if you're non-for-profit?
The issue is that they don't have to turn any profits over to they don't have to turn the profits over to a board of directors or to shareholders.
Shareholders, right.
They can take any of that, and the salaries that they pay themselves are taken out of the profits so that they don't actually have any profits.
But we can go start a competing...
no, you can't.
No, that's the whole thing. This is a monopoly. Government monopolized
the government
utility.
has only made it legal for this utility to service.
That's why we need government, Josh.
No, that's why we don't need government. Anyway,
we need to go after these oil companies so we can lower our costs locally.
That's right. If government was in control, our costs would go down.
All we need is another government-owned utility to go out there and bring us natural gas in a truck, because you know what? That's going to be the cheapest possible way.
That will bring our utilities down, just like GVA has done.
Sarcasm alert. Hey,
Big time.
we have the hotline going. Is that who I think it is?
I don't know. Let's check them.
All right. Good morning, hotline. Who's this?
This is Jim in Kenai. How are you doing today?
Good, man. Thanks for calling in.
Well, thank you for having me. If you don't mind, I'd like to set the Wayback Machine for a week ago.
Go for it.
Token Socialist called in, and he had some good points there. And I like Token Socialist like you do, because he's good for discussion. He listens and he responds on topic. He doesn't just pull out a cue card with hot button words on it, and that's great. Something I'd like him to think about for the learned helplessness is that we actually have taught helplessness in America. Starting back after the slaves were freed, you had they were competing with white people for jobs, and that's what Lincoln didn't want to have happen. That's why he wanted to ship them all overseas. He didn't want black people competing with white people for jobs. And this drove the price of certain jobs down. For instance, railroad porters and railroad workers, the black people were not quite as popular as the white people for those jobs, so they'd work at a lower price in order to make themselves competitive for the work. And the white people didn't like that, so they unionized. Union is simply a government-enforced cartel on labor. And so they said, you can't pay less than $7 an hour, or whatever it would be back then, probably a nickel an hour. You can't pay less for this job. And then the railroad is looking at, well, I can hire, this is much higher than, the minimum wage is much higher than these black people were willing to work for, but it's pretty close to what the white people are willing to work for, so I can so if between the two, I'd rather have somebody I like than somebody I don't like, who is just a slave just a little while ago. So that was a way of actually establishing racism against, or establishing a ceiling on where black people could work. They couldn't get those jobs because white people were willing to work for those, and that disemployed the black people. It took away their competitive advantage, was being willing to work for less, and that was the unions. So that taught them that was the first step in teaching them that you're just not wanted. And then there was the minimum wage law during the Great Depression, and that spread that sort of mindset throughout the entire economy. If you can hire somebody you like or somebody you don't like for a given price, you're going to tend to hire the people you like and not take a chance on the people you don't like. And so that kind of instituted unemployment among black people. But even that wasn't enough. Black people still managed to find nooks and crannies in the economy that they could fill that weren't governed by the minimum wage laws in order to get their feet on the economic ladder out of poverty. And that was working pretty well. If you look at the charts, the black wealth in the black families was increasing all the way up through LBJ. But then LBJ said, hey, we'll pay you not to form families. We'll pay you to be helpless. We'll pay you to have destructive life choices. And that's when the progress in the black family came pretty much to a screeching halt, not immediately on the passage of those laws, but as they started being implemented. And he provided the same incentive structure to the black family that we're providing to all families now. And the thing that proves that this isn't a race-related issue is that all races are responding to these incentives in the exact same way. We're seeing family formation problems across the entire culture now.
There is a free market answer to what you're saying. For every new mouth to feed, there's 2 new hands to produce.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting one of the things that was popping through my mind the whole time you were talking, starting with Lincoln, is that these laws that you were talking about were exactly racist laws. If you really look at it with LBJ, I mean, you hit it on the head with Lincoln. He was not a great emancipator that wanted all the blacks to be free and commingle with the whites. He wanted exactly what you just said. He wanted to free them. Well, that was an afterthought. But once they were free, he wanted to ship them off back to Africa because he didn't want them around. And these laws that came about, that the state produced, were racist. And these people that people stand up and hold up as great civil rights people and people that loved the races and blah, blah, blah were actually racist themselves.
Yeah, if you really want to crush somebody, if you really want to destroy their soul, make them an object of government charity, and you will destroy all of their self-respect. You will destroy their self-worth, and they will descend into animals. And this is happening in England because England is much further down the socialist path. This is happening across all races and all classes in England. People are becoming permanent adolescents where they want to be able to make choices without having to suffer any consequences for their choices, and that's pretty much what adolescent is, right? You get to make stupid decisions and force daddy to foot the bill. Well, eventually you run out of people willing to play daddy because they notice that they pay the cost, but they don't have any of the fun.
Or dad runs out of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about why? I've had this conversation with people that don't understand maybe, but why the minimum, well, I guess you kind of did, but can you expand on minimum wage law? Why they're not good for poor people?
An employer is not an economic end. An employer is an agent for the customer who buys from him. So every time the employer decides to hire somebody, he has to decide if that employee is going to produce enough goods for the customer compared to what he's going to cost the employer to hire him. So when an employer looks at somebody, he's got to say, will this person produce enough goods for my customer to offset the price of hiring him, the mandatory benefits that I have to pay for him, and then the risk that he may steal from me or get me sued, and he has to weigh all that. So if you've got somebody who has a spotty job history, or you have reason to believe comes from a poor part of town where maybe there aren't social norms of being responsible, then you're going to have to see a higher output from him to offset all of the costs in order for him to have a chance of getting to work for you.
Right, the $7.25 an hour that you have to pay him may not be worth it.
Right, he may if he only generates $3 worth of output according to your customer's estimation of his work, then every hour you hire him, you're losing money, which means you're going to go out of business, or it means that somebody else has to output that much more, in which case you're shortchanging the more productive workers.
And it actually makes it harder for that person to get a job.
Because he has no way to show, I'm not like the people you know who look like me, right, or I'm not like the people in my town that have given that I'm suffering from their reputation. Nobody has perfect information about another human being. We have to go based on our past experience, because learning everything about everybody just takes too long. We'd never be able to make any decisions.
All right, where those ideas come from, obviously from the far left, is where you get minimum wage laws. And those ideas come from communism, because Karl Marx, the big defining difference between, if you go read Marx's works, they're not a far cry from what I believe in. But where the defining difference really is when he comes to the market, and he explains the fact that the employer, when he employs somebody, the wage, or what am I looking for here? The profit that he makes above and beyond that wage is actually exploitation.
Right. He doesn't understand that in a free market, the workers could band together and form their own company, but they'd have the risk of possibly producing something that wouldn't sell.
Right. The difference is the time preference. Obviously, the worker prefers goods right now, and
a weekly check.
Right, and the employer is looking at goods farther down the road. So his time preference is the only real difference there in that market equation that Karl Marx defined as exploitation. And all of the left's ideology for minimum wage laws comes from Karl Marx and communism proper.
And it's been institutionalized by the right now too.
Right. Sure, I understand that, but I'm just trying to expand upon where the idea comes from.
And what's funny though is that Marx was building on an error in Smith, because Adam Smith had the labor theory of value kind of built into his framework accidentally. So Marx took an error in Smith and ran with it.
There were protests this week in Seattle that shut down a couple of fast food restaurants because they were protesting that they needed to raise the wage for fast food workers to $15 an hour. It's right there. It's reported from KOMO TV in Seattle. Josh is reading the article.
The medium hourly wage now there is $9.50 an hour, but they're saying that they're seeking national campaign seeking to pay at least $15 an hour, which on one hand is fine. If people want to quit working and say we demand more wage, that's their right. That's their right to do. It's not right for the state to come in and say you have to pay them $15, because if you can't afford the $15 an hour,
how much would a hamburger cost to be able to pay the workers $15 an hour?
Eventually, well, this would, from the standpoint of the nanny state, this would actually work out well, because it would make fast food uneconomical, and people would, that would incentivize people to buy higher quality food. But people choose fast food because it's convenient. They're on the road, and they need something quickly.
Right. Isn't that the same road you go down, though, with something like health insurance, where mandates make it more expensive, and so more people opt out, and so eventually they have to make it mandatory so nobody can opt out, and then that makes it even more expensive, and then people wonder why they start selecting who gets health care and who doesn't, because they have to do something, because like Measy said, intervention leads to intervention, which leads to intervention.
Middle of the road leads to socialism.
Well, hey, look, all I want to know is, if you're going to go with $15 an hour, why not go to $50?
Well, that's just unreasonable there, Steve. I don't know what you're thinking. Nobody wants to go to 50. That's just silly.
I remember I asked a guy on your show, I was a representative, and you had a Republican and a Democrat in your show at the time, and I asked them about minimum wage, and they were both for it. And I said, why? And he said, well, even $7.50, we live in Fairbanks, it's expensive to live here. I said, okay, so it's helping these people? Oh, yeah, we get, these people get their jobs. And I said, why don't you make it 30? And he couldn't answer that. If $7.50 or $7.25 is lifting these people up, why don't you demand that everything's $30 an hour and really give them a good wage?
Because conceptual thinking is impossible for these people.
Well, why is everything so expensive in Fairbanks? I mean, you have to go back a little further than just simply the immediate sense of extra money in your pocket means you can buy more. One of the reasons why things are more expensive is because there are some people in this town that have more money to spend.
The other reason is that there are so many government mandates in this town telling you how much you have to pay, what you have to provide, what you have to do at your job, what you need to have as a service for your job, which if it was just left to the market, you wouldn't need all those things. You would get the people that you deserved. Exactly what you deserved. If you owned a company and you treated your guys like crap, you didn't give them a bathroom, they had to pee outside, they had to do this or that, you would have crappy employees. And then you would go out of business. Right. But if you treated them right and said, hey, I got this benefit, I can get this benefit, I can pay this, I can pay that, then you would get the good people.
Working conditions is a consumption good, the same as Nintendo's or anything else. And the more wealth there is, the better the working conditions will be as a consequence. It's an effect of raising wealth.
I want to go back to what Aaron said, because I don't know if people understood everything about when he was saying that on the time preference, employees usually, they work an employee job because they want to get a check.
Right now.
They need a check.
I got to build a pay.
There's nothing wrong with that. And when he was saying, the employer, the owner of the business, he is looking, well, I'm going to spend this money now because my time preference is way down here, hoping that my product will sell in a year's time. In 6 months' time, I'll make that back. And there's nothing wrong with that. But people don't understand that's the way that little game works.
The employer is an entrepreneur in that he's accumulating capital to cover the spread between when production starts and when the customer takes delivery and pays. And he's also covering the risk that the customer may never pay because the customer may decide he doesn't like that good. So the entrepreneur takes risk, and the employee takes no risk in production because he gets paid every week.
Whether or not the item sells.
All speculation aside, on the part of the entrepreneur,
sure.
the defining difference between the two is just simply their time preference.
This is true. I'm kind of bundling the two different tasks together, the two different jobs of the entrepreneur or the employer.
All right, gentlemen, we have managed to accumulate all 4 lines on hold right now, but we are up against
the clock.
Well, it was fun, guys.
Hey, I can't wait till you get up here. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy that.
Why don't we just leave Jim on?
Because Jeff Berwick's calling here in the next hour.
So we're expecting Jeff Berwick.
So Jeff's more important than Jim.
I didn't say that.
I'll give that up.
I didn't say that.
Thanks, Jim from Gainesville, for calling in
Thanks,
this hour.
Jim.
All right, we are coming up here in about a minute.
I enjoyed Jim.
Real quick, before we get there, I do want to make sure that folks know where they can go to get more information about what we've been talking about thus far.
Jim's Facebook?
This hour.
Yeah.
Well,
the guy's brilliant.
I was thinking more in terms of the Patriots Lament.
Yeah. Patriots Lament. .blogspot.com. We do talk about all these things on there, and no one comments except for Jim, and he makes it better than what I wrote every time.
Did you also have a YouTube channel where folks can go back and listen to all of the shows?
Radio Free Fairbanks. If you go to YouTube, just click Radio Free Fairbanks. Our shows are on there and different things that we've subscribed to. Like you'll find, well, I don't even know what's on there. I know Jeff Berwick's website's on there and stuff like that. Or you can go on our blog. We have tons of different other blogs of people way smarter than we are. Like Lou Rockwell, Tom Woods, Jeff Berwick.
So the action point for this hour is...
What did we start off with?
Well, we began by talking about the... I don't even remember now. But time preference, I think, would probably be the biggest issue for this hour.
The law. That's what we started with.
All right, stay with us. We have another hour on the way of Patriots Lament right here on KFAR Local Talk Radio.
KFAR Fairbanks, 660 AM. Online at KFAR660.com. KFAR. It's where you can talk about the real issues facing you.
If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens the free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams.
Whenever the legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience. and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
My people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
Welcome to Patriots Lament right here on KFAR. This is Local Talk Radio 660 on your AM dial here in Fairbanks, Alaska, but also streaming live around the world at KFAR660.com and available on your smartphone, the free TuneIn Radio app. Joining us in the studio, as always, Aaron Bennett and Josh Bennett, the folks who have, actually, they came up with the idea for the show in the first place. The content is theirs. The money to pay for the airtime is theirs, which is why you do not hear any commercials during these 2 hours. It is because they have paid for the airtime. And I just wanted to throw out there, if you would like to pay for your own airtime,
come see Steve.
That's right. We can arrange something.
Wasn't that an ad right there?
No, that was a public service announcement. It's all about the
PSA.
Exactly. We do have a special guest calling in right now. Did you want to go directly to...
Yeah, we got Jeff Berwick from the Dollar Vigilante on here, one of our favorite guests, and our only third-time guest. He was our first, second guest, and here we are starting the third year of our show, and he's agreed to be with us today to talk about the end of the monetary system as we know it.
The end of the monetary system as we know it. Jeff, are you there?
Yes, I am. How you guys doing?
Doing very well. Thanks for calling in.
Good. How have you been?
I've been great. How have you been?
Really good. Been enjoying reading about your ventures throughout the world and going to less freer states from the state that you reside in. I don't think maybe a lot of people don't know this, but Jeff actually had been on, wasn't it Fox News recently?
Yeah, I've been all over. I've been on Fox Business, CNBC, Bloomberg.
How is it that the anarchist is getting onto Fox News?
Well, I didn't really tell them I was an anarchist, but...
Don't they have people to research that, though, in the first place? I mean, goodness gracious, having somebody as dangerous as a non-statist on the airwaves.
Yeah, I don't know how I snuck through.
Yeah, no joke. I don't know how you sneak through anything, actually. What would you like to talk about first? I mean, you've got so many cool things going. We know you got your new Gulch in Chile you're working on now, and we talk a lot about hating the state on this show in particular, and you have a specialty in something that we like to talk about also is fleeing the western states, fleeing America. I know you have programs that help people get second passports and residences outside of America, and you help people get their wealth out of America and Canada and such places like that. Would you like to talk a little bit about the importance, especially as time goes on, it only gets worse, of getting your wealth out, and why?
Yeah, sure. There's so much going on, and I guess just one thing I'd like to say off the top is that I talk a lot about this, and I talk quite calmly about it, but things are getting quite serious now. Every week something crazy is going on, and I think it's quite important that people realize that although I might be joking about it or laughing, it's actually fairly serious sort of stuff. I just joke and laugh about it because otherwise I'd be really depressed if I just look at the news every day. But there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. Since, well, the last time we talked, I don't even remember when that was, probably at least 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I can't even go through all the things that have happened since then. Of course, Boston was locked down, became an entire police state. That was a nice trial test balloon they ran there, just seeing if they could get an entire American city to hide in their houses because there was a 19-year-old boy with a pressure cooker running around, and they managed to do it. There's just so much going on, and I really just want to emphasize that if you have assets, and if you live in the U.S. or Canada or Europe, and I think Europe's going to be one of the first to go. I think Japan will be the first to go of the Western sort of fashioned central bank, democratic, socialist, fascist nation states. That you should be looking to do it quite quickly. I see so many symptoms and I see so many things going on that I can't even keep up. I try to write, well, we do write once a day on our website at thedollarvigilante.com. And we have to pick between 10 or 20 things per day to write about. There's that many things going on. It seems like it's speeding up as well. The Canadian government, as one example, just recently put in their budget for 2013 that they can do this exact same thing that Cyprus did, which is they can they put in the budget, the actual Canadian government budget, that if the Canadian banks have problems, and they will have problems, that they can take money out of their depositors' account and use it as their own, just like they did in Cyprus. So this has actually been codified into basically law in Canada, whereas in Cyprus that was never even the case. They just went ahead and did it. Like, this is being actually laid out and talked about already. So it's definitely important to, if you have assets, get some of them outside of your own country. If you have the ability to get out, I would suggest you get out, unless you want to see a lot of chaos and violence and revolution. Not necessarily up in Alaska. That's pretty quiet up there. I don't know what will happen up there. But in the mainland U.S., especially the major cities, especially in the cities where most of the people are on welfare, they've been on welfare for generations. When those welfare cards get cut off, they're not going to be very happy. And there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. The U.S. government, of course, is buying billions of hollow point bullets for Homeland Security. That's not even for the military. They're buying tanks. They're buying all kinds of military machinery for Homeland insecurity. So they're getting ready for something. Something's going to happen. I don't know when. It could be as soon as tomorrow, really. It could be this year. It could be next year. It's probably not going to be much longer than that before we start to see some really crazy stuff happening, and we're already seeing crazy stuff, but even crazier. And so that'd be the one thing I'd want to emphasize, is that if you're thinking this way and you want to do something, that I think time is starting to run short if you're going to be doing some of these things.
Can I throw something in there real quick?
Yeah.
Not just the TSA, but it seems like all localized police forces have all received, things of that nature. Like even right here in little tiny Fairbanks, our local law enforcement just received armored vehicles. Is that all down the same line, you think?
Yeah, I think it's all going in that direction. They seem to really be militarizing the police. They're also been making an effort not to hire intelligent police officers. They actually won't hire anyone with an IQ over, I believe, 120 or something fairly moderate. They're training them for whatever reason as any threat whatsoever to themselves. They can just go ahead and kill everybody. Like what happened in LA with Donner. They knew he was in a Nissan Titan pickup truck, and it was blue color, and the LA cops drove around town shooting any pickup trucks they saw. It's bizarre. A lot of these cops come back from, of course, terrible ordeals in Iraq and Afghanistan, and come back very traumatized. They're usually quite drugged because a lot of them are depressed. Actually, almost everyone in the military is depressed. There's dozens of military people commit suicide every day, and I don't blame them. They're involved in an incredibly heinous criminal murder, genocidal enterprise that has no real purpose other than just mayhem and murder. So so a lot of these people are becoming cops, and it's just unbelievable. Just yesterday, a 14-year-old boy in Florida, I believe, was just gang tackled by cops and basically beat up for no reason, except for they said he gave them a dehumanizing look, whatever that means. So this is the way it's going, especially in the mainland U.S. I haven't been up to Alaska lately, so I can't speak for Alaska, but that's the way it's going in the mainland, and it's also going that way in Canada. I just came from Canada. Every place I went, there's police, all dressed in SWAT gear, and going into restaurants, IDing people. So it's all happening, and it's definitely not going in the right direction.
Yeah, our law enforcement here and pretty much statewide has started a program where they go once a year and they train pretty hard with the military.
And then you just had on your daily blog, that comes out, something that the military just released and codified, where they don't even have to have presidential directive to use military force on American people.
Yeah, that's right. Wendy McElroy wrote about that just recently, and that's the way the U.S. government's been going for a while now. It's almost like anyone can do anything in the government. Most of these laws that get passed, they're not even passed actually through Congress or Senate. They're just passed through bureaucrats. And now what we're seeing, so basically any bureaucrat can just pass a law, and then you can have it enforced by the police with all their guns. Wendy McElroy just wrote about how the military has basically just passed that. I'm just looking it up right now. It just went into effect. It's called the U.S. Code Defense Support of Civilian Law Enforcement Agencies, and it was altered by the Department of Defense to make it so that federal military commanders have the authority in extraordinary emergency circumstances where prior authorization by the president is impossible and duly constituted local authorities are unable to control the situation to engage temporarily in activities that are necessary to quell large-scale unexpected civil disturbances. So what that's basically saying is if they can't get a hold of the president and other people are too busy, the military can just go ahead and do whatever they want, which, if you look at Homeland Security and all those sort of things, they already basically can, but this just further shows that this is what they're thinking. The military is getting ready to do whatever it takes to quell the society who is probably unhappy about a number of things, and rightly so. It's just unbelievable the way this is all going. I think if you look back to 1776, and you ask some of the people around then if they thought the U.S. would ever get to this point, I don't think anyone could have ever imagined.
Well, just think about... I'm sorry.
This is Steve Floyd. I actually served in the military. I was in the Army for 5 years, back in the early 90s. And in 1994, we at Fort Wainwright had a plan of what to do in just the case that you were talking about. Basically, the military has always had that power to do that. They don't necessarily have the authority to do it, but they've always had the power to do it, and we were talking openly about what we would do in the early 90s.
And if you look at, it's kind of interesting what you just said about in 1776, look at the difference between Boston in 1776, when the British wouldn't dare walk through the streets of Boston without a large force because the people would run them out, so they had to stay in the bay in their ships. Fast forward to 2013, Boston gets put under lockdown and not a peep. The only thing we hear is that once they catch the supposed terrorist, everyone shouts, USA, USA. And not a peep that they were put under martial law and forced and told to stay in your home until we get there, then we'll drag you out of your home, and don't make a peep or we'll kill you.
Yeah, it was truly shocking. I was actually in New York when that happened, and not many people know this, but there was a time during that day when they were looking for that 19-year-old boy with some kitchen cooking equipment, and everyone was panicking, and they actually said they thought he might be going to New York. And Bloomberg actually put out, within seconds, I don't know how he could be so fast, but he said, if he's coming to New York, we're going to shut this city down. And that's basically what he said. And I was sitting in a New York hotel room, and all of a sudden sweat just started coming down my forehead. An anarchist in a hotel room, therefore an anarchy convention. in a city that gets locked down and totally militarized, that doesn't have a good potential outcomes, I don't think. So I was literally about to throw all my stuff in my suitcase and literally run to catch a cab to somewhere like Philadelphia and take a plane out of there or something to somewhere outside of the U.S. if I could. And then they said, oh, we've got him. He's in a boat, and he's hiding in a boat, and he's throwing bombs and shooting and writing notes and whatever else they said he was doing, which was all BS.
Yeah, it was. I had a friend of mine say, he commented how it was amazing that the terrorists were able to shut down the city of Boston. And I said, yeah, the terrorist was the state, because the actual bombers, the accused bombers, they didn't actually shut down the city of Boston. The state, the real terrorists were the state, and they shut down the city of Boston. I mean, while we were so worried about, and it was a horrible act of aggression, whoever did it, then killed 3 people, which is horrible, and yet 3 days earlier, not a word was peeped about Obama drone striking and killing 43 kids somewhere over in the brown people world.
The thing is, the effects of Boston aren't done yet. I mean, didn't the police just kill somebody else down in Florida who was connected to the Boston bombers? Hear about that?
Yeah, just shot him. He was unarmed.
But he made a threatening motion.
He might have gave him a dehumanizing stare.
Yeah. Shot him 7 times.
Yeah, the other thing about the Boston thing is, you know, if the U.S. was the way it used to be, where people had their own self-defense, their own arms, this sort of thing could and would never happen. As an example, I was saying, I live here in Mexico, and most people have guns. They actually are allowed to have permission to have guns. You have to ask for a permit, but most people just don't care about the government here. Most people have guns, and a lot of people have their own private security guards or whatever. And I was saying, if there was a 19-year-old boy with a pressure cooker running around here, everyone would just be like, okay, well, if he comes near our house and we see him, we'll kill him. And that'd be basically it. There'd be no major panic. A lot of people in the U.S. nowadays are so trained to instantly call 911 and ask the government to come and save you. It's really crazy what's going on. Like, I watch a lot of those videos on YouTube, like Walmart sites or House of Pancake sites or whatever. There's like 20 a day. And almost every time someone even says anything to somebody like, hey, I'm going to beat you up or something, you hear everyone back down, call 911, call 911. You know, that's the state of things in the U.S. today, is that people have been trained for decades now to not be able to even know how to defend themselves, not even know what to do in any sort of situation except for call the government. And that's exactly what happened in Boston, obviously.
Yep. Jeff, we are having some serious difficulties hearing you now. Your connection is getting progressively worse. Are you on some kind of a government line?
Just checking my microphones. How does it sound? Does it sound like it's an internet problem or a microphone?
It sounds like there's a mixer in the back doing the rap.
Yeah, we've got somebody doing the scratch on your voice there, the wiki.
So. That's strange.
So it might be, it's probably an internet issue there, because it doesn't sound like your mic is cracking. It sounds like the connection in between the call and our connection over on this end. But we've got thousands of miles of statists in between you and us, so that might have something to do with it.
Why don't we just go? It's in and out, so let's go to if you don't mind, Jeff, let's just keep going here till the half hour. We have a 1 minute break at the half hour, and could you try calling back then? Maybe we'll get a better line.
Sure, sounds good.
All right. Can I ask a follow-up question on what you were just saying about people calling 911? Things are getting so ridiculous. They just arrested a boy, I think it was in Missouri, because he brought a gun on a school bus. The gun that he brought was a little Lego gun. It was obviously a toy, a little piece of Lego. And one of the other kids yelled, "He's got a gun!" So the school bus driver called it in. They were met by police, and this little kid was arrested for bringing a Lego onto a bus because it was a Lego gun.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. This happens like almost every day now. I don't know if you saw the one where the little kid shaped his Pop-Tart into the shape of a gun.
Yeah.
That's suspended.
Was arrested for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was arrested for it.
All the time, yeah. Just for stuff like that. So just yesterday, someone had a boom microphone. He was doing a video for his high school, and someone thought it was a gun, and they locked down the school and searched everybody. So this is happening almost every day in the U.S. now.
And you're saying that this doesn't happen in Mexico?
Well, my kids, I have them in a private school, and that would never, ever happen down here. That's the cool thing about private schools is you actually have, if they do something you don't like, you can just pull your kids out of that school, and then that school, if enough people pull their kids out, will have to close. But of course, with these public schools, there's never any chance of any of them ever closing, ever, and any teacher ever getting fired. It's communist-style central planning in the education system, and it's terrible.
Yeah, you don't even see a school shut down when there's no kids going to it anymore.
No.
They still keep
it's the opposite of free markets, right? Anything run by the government is the opposite of private enterprise, and it has all the wrong incentives, it's just terrible. People should naturally know this. If they know that the Soviet Union was a really bad idea because it was centrally planned, then they shouldn't want central planning of the education system. They shouldn't want central planning of the monetary system through the Federal Reserve. They shouldn't want all types of central planning of every government agency.
Well, in central planning, we were talking about in the first hour, even with our local utilities, they're all government centrally planned monopolies. They get to charge us whatever they feel like, and there's no blowback if they don't produce a good service to us because there's no one to compete against them.
Sounds like law enforcement.
Even if you produce your own electricity, they can legally tap into it and take it away from you.
Right. You have to.
Yeah.
Land of the free.
Exactly.
Yeah, just recently, Detroit's having a lot of financial problems, as I'm sure you're aware, and basically the cops just don't even show up, even if you call them anymore there. And so a lot of private policing companies have started up, and we featured one on our blog. It was really excellent, just to hear the difference between private policing and public policing. So this guy was talking about all the things they're doing. They say they always put the customer's life before theirs, and they all have to swear to that. Whereas if you look at the public police today, they're all being trained that no matter what, make sure you're safe. You, the police officer, are safe. Just the other day, someone held someone hostage and had a gun out, and the guy who's holding the person hostage and had the gun, I guess he made a motion towards the cops a little bit, not even trying to shoot, but made some sort of motion, and the cops just blew away both the hostage and the hostage taker with 50 bullets or something like that. So these guys are not in it to protect people. They're in it to protect themselves and get their $100,000 a year paycheck for the most part. Of course, there's some good cops, of course, but in general and on average, it seems like it's going that way, that's the mindset. And so you have this private policing company in the U.S., in Detroit, and he was saying, people were saying, so who are your clients? And he said, well, we have about 500 private clients, or 1,000 private clients, about 500 corporate clients. And then he says, we actually offer free policing to everyone in the areas we're at anyway, because we're making a good profit from our corporate clients. So it just goes to show, people always ask, well, what happened in anarchy? Well, that's anarchy right there, and it's working out great. And I'm sure he's not busting people for going 5 miles per hour over speed limits or any sort of arbitrary supposed crime. He's probably, or I'm sure he's only attending to victim crimes with a victim. It's just amazing. And hopefully people wake up, and as the U.S. degradates, and they have to start taking care of themselves more, hopefully people realize that this is a much better system anyway, and just let go of the old system.
That's fantastic. I'm glad you brought that specific story up, because that's one of the things that people ask here more than anything is, well, in your society, if it was true, then only rich people would have defense mechanisms and all the rest of the people would just get killed because everyone's a Hobbesian and we'd all just run around with machetes and kill each other, and the rich people would have their private security and everyone else would just die. And you just brought up a story that proves the exact opposite. That's fantastic.
All right, we are coming up here on the half-hour break. If we could get you to call back in, Jeff, we're going to try to hopefully roll the dice and get a non-statist line to cut down on some of the interference. You've got it on Patriots Lament right here on KFAR, local talk radio, but online at KFAR660.com. streaming live around the world. We're also available on your smartphone by way of the free TuneIn Radio app. And as a user of that particular app, may I suggest that if you're going to connect, that you do through over somebody else's Wi-Fi link, because if you pay the data charge, you can end up paying quite a bit to get our free service. All right, Fox News coming your way, and then it's back for more Patriots Lament on the local talk radio, KFAR.
Don't touch that dial. Fox News is here on KFAR.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. The Oklahoma City region, trying to bounce back from major storms that hit almost 2 weeks ago, must now deal with yesterday's rain and tornadoes that left 9 dead. El Reno Mayor Matt White.
We had about 8 inches to 9 inches following during the tornado, and after that, a lot of flooding, and that's a problem trying to get first responders around the town.
President Obama in his weekly address says the economy is improving, urging Congress to do its part.
We've got to keep this progress going until middle-class families start regaining that sense of security. And we can't let partisan politics get in the way.
In the GOP response, Alaska Governor Sean Parnell pushing for energy independence.
The Republican House has acted. It's time for the Democratic-controlled Senate to do the same.
A second man's been charged in London with killing a soldier run down by a car and hacked to death. He had been in the hospital for injuries suffered in the attack. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Helping you get past life's pressures and trying to make your day a little easier. Local Talk Radio, 660 AM.
Back to Patriots Lament right here on KFAR, hoping to get a better connection with Jeff Berwick on the line. Good morning, Jeff.
Hi, how's it sounding now?
Oh, we still have some scratchy, but I think we can deal with it. We can live with the fact that we're talking with somebody who's several thousand miles away from us. So what's that, Josh?
That's still fascinating.
It is. The technology blows my mind. But thanks for calling back in. Josh, where do we go from here?
Well, I was going to ask him, one of the things that we hear when we talk about escaping the U.S. and things like that is people say, well, where are you going to go? I mean, you can't go to South America. They're so corrupt, and our government tells us that there's drug runners everywhere, and people die by the millions. I don't know if you know that, but people get killed by the millions in other countries. And the reason that we need to stay is because it's so safe. Our benevolent government will take care of us, but if you leave, who knows what will happen to you?
You might get arrested on a bus in Mexico for having marijuana under your seat that wasn't yours.
That's right. So can you talk about a little bit? I mean, these things are not true, right? Isn't some of this stuff is just propaganda put out by our state to keep the sheep here when there really is freedom outside of America?
Oh yeah, the most scared I ever am is in the U.S. I have threat of being kidnapped almost at any time in any place by people in blue costumes. Not to mention that a place like Chicago, I think about 40 people get shot every single weekend. No one ever talks about that, and the reason is the media and the government are one and the same, of course, in the U.S. and they have every desire to try to make it so people are scared of the outside world. So the NBC Nightly News doesn't ever start up every night and go, 20 more people shot in Chicago today. They never say that. They always say, oh, there was a headless body found in Mexico, don't go there. They try to make it's all fear-based. That's really how the government and the media both work. And they try to make the world look as scary as possible because they don't want you to escape their tax farm. I even think they're attacking Mexico a lot. They're doing so many things to try to cause problems in Mexico, of course, including the drug war, which is horrible. The Attorney General of the U.S. was running guns into Mexico for years, all admitted to, and he's never had any sort of anything happen to him. I think it's because Mexico is a much freer country, and it's very close to the U.S., of course. And the more that people come to Mexico, the more they'll go back to the U.S. and realize, oh, maybe I don't live in the land of the free if I can't do anything here and I can do anything I want in Mexico, basically. And so, yeah, they really try to make an effort to make the world look scary. I've traveled the world. I tried to go by sailboat. I made it part of the way. I made it to El Salvador, and then I just kept going. And I've been to about 90 or 100 countries now. And I can't think of any place. I actually had one woman ask me. I was sitting in Aruba in the Caribbean at one of those Japanese places where people sit around and the guy cooks for you. And the woman from New York was there, and she was asking me, and she said, wow, I can't believe you've been to 100 countries. She goes, you must have seen some incredibly dangerous, horrible things. And that question really threw me off because I've never heard that question before. To me, I've got a million great stories. I've never even thought about any bad stories. So I sat back and I thought for a second, I went, I can only think of 2 times during my travels that I really thought there was a chance I was going to die from some sort of violent act. And she said, oh, where was that? And I said, you know what? Both times it was in New York. And she was like, oh, that can't be. But it's true. I've been involved in a few very strange, violent situations in New York. But never anywhere else, anywhere in the world. Most places are quite nice. Definitely the kind of crime you have in the U.S., they don't even have that kind of crime in most places. I'll give you an example here in Acapulco. When I first moved here, I'm from Canada, and Canada is just as bad or even worse than the U.S. for petty crimes like car break-ins and stuff like that. And I had a Mexican girlfriend, and she left her sunglasses on the dash of my car. And I had just moved to Acapulco, so I was kind of new to how it all worked. And I said to her, hey, get your sunglasses. And she looked at me kind of like, why? And I said, someone's going to steal them. And she just looked at me like, what? Like, who does that? Like, that just doesn't happen around where I live around here. Whereas where I'm from, originally in Vancouver, all I see on Facebook every day is my friends just keep going, oh, my car got broken into again, my car got broken into again. So you don't really have a lot of that stuff. And a lot of that stuff's caused by this welfare state stuff. It's caused by all the taxes, which make people poor. It's caused by all the regulations which destroy the economy. It's caused by the Federal Reserve, which prints up tons of money, which destroys actual capital because it misallocates capital because business people and entrepreneurs can't tell what's real and what's not, so they end up investing tons of money into things like the housing bubble in 2006 and building millions of houses that no one needs. That destroys capital. So this has been going on in the U.S. and Canada and Europe for a long time now, and it's really, over time, degrading and destroying the entire society. And you have in the U.S. now 1 in 4 children on food stamps, 1 in 6 Americans now on food stamps. It's just unbelievable, a massive amount of welfare, and even the unemployment numbers are totally skewed. The actual real amount of unemployment is definitely over 20% if you look at it objectively and realistically. And this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse and worse because of all the things I just mentioned, mostly the Federal Reserve and the government deficits, which are just massive now. The amount of debt in the U.S. is now $17 trillion, which, that number was only about $8 trillion about 6 years ago when Barack Obama entered. So it's almost doubled since he's got in. And that doesn't actually include all the things that the U.S. government does, like socialist insecurity and all those sort of things. Those things aren't included. If you include those things like any other company would have to do, the total debt and liabilities of the U.S. federal government is $85 trillion, which works out to about $250,000 per person in the U.S., man, woman, and child. So that's $1 million per family of four of U.S. government only federal government debt and liabilities overhanging it. So this cannot work. It's going to all collapse. The U.S. dollar is going to collapse. The U.S. government, in one way or another, is going to collapse, but then probably not going to go down without a fight. So yeah, it's just a crazy, crazy time, and so talking about crime, really the worst place I've ever been for a real kind of seems sort of dangerous sort of crime sort of things is Canada and the U.S. I just came back to Vancouver. There's homeless people everywhere, people begging, and the way they beg isn't really like they're begging. They're almost like saying they want some money.
It's almost assault, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm always relieved to get back to Mexico, and there's no homeless people, no street people, no crime. Everyone's nice, everything's fun. There's no cops everywhere telling you what to do. You can do whatever you want. When I go to light up a cigarette at a bar here, the only thing that happens is one of the waitresses runs to light it for me. When I go to leave a bar here with a drink, the only thing they ask is, do I want any ice for my drink when I leave? It's just a night and day nowadays, and I have a hard time even going up to the U.S. anymore or Canada. It's just that it's just too dangerous. I'm in danger of always. I had 3 cops talk to me the last time I was up in Vancouver. I wasn't talking to them. They told me to do things, and it's just uncomfortable being constantly told what to do and being people using violence and force of guns against you to make you do arbitrary things like don't smoke here or move over there or you're blocking the sidewalk or whatever. It's really the opposite. And the more that people travel, I think the more they realize that the world out there is actually much better in general than the U.S. today.
Hey, Jeff, can I ask you a question here about historically speaking? I mean, when you talk about how the monetary system is going to collapse, what I hear people here, they cannot comprehend what that's going to look like. They cannot. I mean, it's like, well, what are we going to use for money? They just can't wrap their mind around what it would look like when a monetary system will collapse. It's happened before in history, though, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, it's happened hundreds of times, of course.
Give us a really good example of when it happened and what happened to the society afterwards.
Oh, there's so many to pick from. Argentina does it about every 10 years. But they do it so often that it's almost like a national sport now, and it's not really a major problem. It causes problems, but a lot of people go out with pots and pans, and then they start from scratch again. I guess probably the best example would be Weimar Republic in Germany. Mm-hmm. That was a hyperinflation. They just printed up unbelievable amounts of money just to keep the government going, and people were just carrying around wheelbarrows full of cash just to be able to buy a loaf of bread. And these things happen all the time. It's very common. And for people who say, what are we going to use for money? That used to be a question that I used to get asked, and I would always say, the private enterprise, the free market will come up with ways of doing money. We don't need the government to do any of these things. It's actually really bad that the government has a monopoly on money, but people can't get their heads around it because they're used to the government's fiat currency. But now I'm really vindicated because now Bitcoin's come out, and I can at least point to that and say, look, that's one private free market money that has come out. It's met the needs of a part of the market who doesn't want capital controls on money. They don't want the government to be able to control the money. So we're going to have all kinds of things like that. I'm sure there'll be lots of other technological things, like people using, one example, Peter Schiff has Zero Pacific Bank in St. Vincent. There you can actually hold your money in gold, and you actually just have an ATM card, and you can actually take a fiat currency from your gold holdings. So you could see if the dollar collapsed, you could see that might just go to becoming this. That would just be money, the gold in that account. So there's lots of things, but just because people can't imagine it happening, and just because people can't believe because they've never seen it in their lifetime happen to them, doesn't mean it can't happen. It actually has nothing to do with whether it can or cannot happen. It's going to happen. It has to happen. If you actually just look at the numbers, there's almost no way that they can keep this afloat much longer. I guess the only way they could really save the dollar, and this is very, very unlikely that it would even succeed, would be for the U.S. government to get rid of about 90% of its spending, go down to a very small amount, default on their debt, which would cause tremendous amount of financial system upheaval because most banks and most places, they keep most of their assets in treasury notes. So if those go under, then you see all the banks go under. I guess the dollar could survive in that situation, but it would be very iffy if it did because people would be so destroyed by the collapse. They would lose all confidence in the dollar. And that's the only way it can survive. The only other way that they can keep it going a little while longer is what they're doing, and that is to continue to print money until basically the dollar collapses. And that's what they've been doing. They're printing, Ben Bernanke's printing $85 billion a month at a press of a button. The money supply of the Federal Reserve has never gone up this much over a 5-year period. It's been up now for 5 years straight, over 10% per year money printing. And they have to do it because the amount of the debt of the U.S. government is, like I said earlier, $17 trillion. If they stop manipulating the interest rate and they allowed it to go to a free market level like they did in 1980, it would probably return to something like it did in 1980, which is 18%. Even at 10%, with $17 trillion worth of government debt, that would be $1.7 trillion in interest payments alone, and that's pretty much the entire tax theft-based revenue source of the U.S. government. So every penny of their extortion revenue would go towards interest payments at that point in time. So there's no way this system can work. Something's going to have to stop sometime soon, and it's going to be soon, I believe.
Yeah, they can't manipulate the market forever. I mean, it's just, you can't do it.
Yeah, and like Ayn said, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And a lot of people are ignoring reality right now. And I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of them say, I'll be talking about many of these things that we've been talking about, and they'll say, you know what, I just don't want to know. And I don't understand that thing. I want to know everything. I'm very curious, but I guess people are too scared by the thought. But it's better to be scared now and be awake now than to go down with the ship.
And we're definitely not going to see, like you said, the government cutting 90% of their spending out when Ron Paul just suggested going back to 2006 levels spending. He was laughed and mocked right off the stage, like, 2006, that was so long ago. We only spent a couple $1 trillion a year. You want to cut $1 trillion? Good grief. So I don't think there's no fear that they'll actually cut their spending, and I know that Bernanke, he can't. What you just said is, the point is, he can't stop printing money, because once he does, game over.
Well, how many people right now, in terms of the total population of the United States, are on some form of government assistance or receive some form of government benefits? It's just like ancient Rome with the bread and circuses. So many people are invested in getting their free stuff from the government that they don't want to consider what's going to happen to them personally when they stop getting their check.
Yeah, that's right. I think I saw a stat that over 50% of Americans now receive some sort of benefit from the U.S. government, whether it be social insecurity or Medicare or Medicaid or unemployment or welfare or all the other programs. So yeah, when you have a democracy and then you have over 50% of the people getting money from the government, so it's pretty obvious which direction this is going to go from here.
Well, on top of that, Jeff, here in the Fairbanks area, 70% of the people that live here are employed by government.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, employed by the...
We have our own little Athens right here.
Athens, Alaska. Wow. So, I know from people we get to talk to and stuff, and after we have guests such as yourself on, and we've had some other wonderful people been able to join us. And
Jeffrey Tucker was on.
Jeff Tucker, yeah, that was great. One of the things I realized is that most people flat out are not going to leave. either they can't, or they think they can't, or they just can't fathom it. They can't understand or see a way. How do I leave? So I'm just coming to the realization lately that, we talk about leaving, but most people aren't going to. So what advice, if you would be so kind, to give to folks that are going to just stay and ride it out, I guess, is the only way I can think of it. What do they do? Is there any way to protect themselves if they're going to stay here? What do they do?
And before you answer that real quick, if I could, we had Richard Mayberry on the show, and he thinks that it'll be everywhere, and that staying here is just as good as going anywhere else. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, Richard Mayberry is a great guy. Big fan of his. I don't think it's going to be as bad outside of the U.S. as it's going to be inside the U.S. These other countries just don't have the infrastructure, the military, the police to do a lot of the things that they're going to be doing in the U.S. And many of these countries don't have that welfare mentality. There's no one in Mexico on welfare, so there's no welfare to collapse, and they're not going to be out in the streets going, "Where's our welfare?" and breaking windows and fighting people. Most places don't have that mentality. Now, when the U.S. dollar collapses, I believe it's going to be crazy everywhere on Earth. So in that way, I agree with Richard, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near as bad in places like Chile or Singapore as it's going to be in the U.S. I think the U.S. is going to be the worst place to be for this crisis because that's going to be ground zero for the crisis, and because the great majority of the population there still believe it's the freest country on earth. They still believe it's the greatest country on earth. They still believe it's the richest country on earth, and it's none of those things anymore. It's actually the most indebted country in the history of the planet. It's definitely, I can't think of very many places less free in general. North Korea and Cuba are the only two I can think of off the top of my head that I feel less free in general when I go there. So these people, they believe the propaganda. That's one big thing between what happened in the Soviet Union and what's happening in the U.S. is that most people in the Soviet Union didn't actually believe the propaganda. There was two news outlets from the government. One was Izvestia and one was Pravda, and one meant the truth and one meant the news. And there was an old saying in the Soviet Union that there's no news in the truth and there's no truth in the news. Whereas today in the U.S., most people watch CNN as though that's actually true information, and they believe everything they're seeing on there. So these people are going to be absolutely shocked when this happens. And you never know what happens when tens or hundreds of millions of people are completely shocked and blown away and not prepared. It's going to be just an uncomfortable place to be for a few years, to say the very least. And that's not even including what the government might do. And they're giving every indication that they're going to really crack down when stuff starts to happen. And I'd much rather be in Mexico. I always say this about Mexico. The only thing I don't like about it is it's a little too close to the U.S. to my comfort. But other than that, I'm in the southern part of Mexico, and it's most people here, they grow a lot of their own food, and people here have been through the peso collapse and asked a lot of them, how was it? And they said, it wasn't very much fun, but we were all fine. And now we all saved money in gold and silver and stuff like that in case it happens again, and it will happen again. And so the people in a lot of these other places have either gone through it before, and many places, if you think about it, many places have gone through this very similar type collapses in the last 50 or 100 years. And so they still have that memory, whether it's through their parents or grandparents, of collapse, whether it was in Germany or Japan or Soviet Union or pretty much pick any other country on earth.
They've prepared themselves for it, though, because they saw it happen, and they're recognizing what you need to do to prepare. I don't think many Americans are prepared at all.
No, they don't even when. I mean, you get the Austrians have been proven right over and over and over. Look at the 2008 or 7 bubble collapse with the housing, and you had Peter Schiff on all Peter Schiff on all the big networks saying it's a coming, it's gonna blow, it's gonna blow. I mean, he was almost down to the month where he was right, and everyone laughed at him and mocked him and said, "Oh, everything's great, everything's great." Bang! It collapsed. The housing market collapsed, and yet people still mock him. They still mock people like Jeff Berwick. They still mock the Austrians, and they say, it could never happen. It happens over and over. People that see it say, this is coming, then it happens, and then people just close their eyes and say, it'll never happen.
I get my free bread in circuses, I don't care.
Yeah. It's unreal.
Hey, Jeff, a couple minutes ago, you were talking about how you don't have to worry about somebody stealing your sunglasses down in Acapulco. Do you think it is the welfare mentality that people feel like they can take what they want because they're so accustomed to getting things for free that causes the theft?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's social, and part of it's cultural as well, but most of it's caused by the government for sure. I'll give you one really good example of Chile. Chile is booming right now. They pretty much 20 years ago they were full communist, and now they're almost completely capitalist, and they're booming. They have no government debt, no deficits. They don't print much money. They don't even have a Keynesian central bank. They have low regulation. Their taxes are fairly low, and it's booming. It's starting to look like Hong Kong. But every now and then, there's a little problem of pickpockets in Santiago. And I'm looking around because everyone's getting so rich now, and the average Chilean is richer than the average American right now, and that's only after 15 years of changing towards capitalism. Of course, the U.S. has been changing towards communism, so they're kind of meeting in the middle there. But there's a pickpocket problem in Santiago, and I was thinking about it, and there's still some of these kids walking around, and they've got their communist, their Soviet flag and all that kind of stuff, and every now and then they have a little rally in which they say, we want free education. It's mostly those kids. They're still buying into that communist idea, I guess, that you just steal other people's stuff or whatever. But it sort of is, it's part of the culture and the government for sure. Obviously there's other countries where people will steal some stuff, but there's nothing like in the U.S. and Canada. I think it does come a lot of the people who will steal stuff are either on welfare, which destroys people, turns them into just terrible people, and either that or they're addicted to drugs or something like that, and that's mostly caused, again, by society. They probably went through their 12 years of government indoctrination. They were beat up. They came out of there. They couldn't even get a job because of such a horrible education system. Then they're probably taxed tons and impoverished, and all the stresses of having to watch the cops all the time, or you're going to get arrested. All these things, there's literally hundreds of things caused by the government, which eventually really destroys people. So that's sort of what I see when I'm up in the U.S. or Canada, when you see a lot of those people are petty thieves or beggars or homeless people. They've mostly been destroyed through the system itself. You really don't see that hardly anywhere else. It's really part of the system that destroys people.
Well, we're getting down to the last couple minutes here, and I'll just any advice for the poor suckers that stay in the U.S. of A. and maybe Canada if someone's listening from there. And besides, obviously, tune into the Dollar Vigilante because you guys have a wealth of knowledge there and ideas. Can you give us just a few simple things the mindless serfs in America can do to survive, or is there a way to?
Yeah, sure. No, we actually we write a newsletter called TDV Homegrown, and it's exactly for people who can't or won't leave the U.S. or Western countries. And we give them advice on how to survive. That's very general advice. Is fairly well known. I would stay out of major population centers for the next few years. Definitely store at least a month or two of food in your house. During the 2008 collapse, the actual food transportation system actually came to a halt for 3 days. And of course, with all the supermarkets only having a couple days worth of stuff on their shelves, if that would have went on a few more days, you would have seen supermarket shelves totally empty. So definitely have some food. Have some actual money in your house, just in case the bank machines go down, like in Cyprus, which they will. Also have some silver and gold. Try to keep some of it outside of the U.S. if you can, in case they confiscate it. Those sort of things, and of course many more. Try to find ways to work over the internet, and eventually, give yourself options to get out. And I really suggest for some people to at least consider getting a second passport or something, just because this could get really bad, and you want to give yourself some option to get out near the end.
Yep, that sounds great. And you guys also, I said in the beginning, you guys help people, have programs to help people get second passports.
Yeah, we do. It's just at tdbpassports.com.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Jeff Berwick, for joining us today. I've got to have some nice calming music now before my head explodes. Once again, the main website, Dollar Vigilante, is that it?
Yes, that's it. DollarVigilante.com.
All right, thanks again. And
Jeff, thanks as always. You're a great guest. We appreciate all the work that you do out there for liberty.
And check out patriotslament.blogspot.com. We'll see you next week.
Don't touch that dial. Fairbanks is listening. 660 AM, KFAR, Fairbanks.